let's talk about building better vehicle building games. So one of my favorite genres is vehicle building. It's in a slump right now. We're seeing a lot of cloning and not a lot of progress. And I think that's because people don't understand what makes vehicle building so unique and distinctive. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what I see in vehicle building as a genre and why I see a very distinct future in this genre. Let's start by comparing it to base building. Base building games like Minecraft and SimCity and Dwarf Fortress, all of them, versus vehicle building games. Now, vehicle building games are tested differently. How do you test whether or not your construction is good? In a vehicle building game, you go drive your vehicle around. You move through the world and do different things within the world to see whether or not you've built a vehicle that's capable of doing the things you want to do. Pretty basic. But in a base building game, you are the world, and largely you test based on how well things move through you. This different focus is why vehicle building games have such a promising flavor. This means that we can do things with vehicle building games that are not possible in any other genre. So let's talk about it. Let's start with Stormworks, not Star Wars. In Stormworks, you can build whatever kind of vehicles you want. Ships, planes, cars, trains, submarines, whatever. And the world is full of things to test yourself against. Different terrains, different climates, different weathers, different cargo types, different rescue types, different disaster types. And the world is dense enough that even the meta stuff is useful. You can build a useful aircraft carrier, or a useful home base, or a useful air control tower. These things all have a purpose in the game world, and the game world is deep enough, diverse enough, that you can actually test how well your constructions perform. Moreover, all of these considerations are multiplicative. So if I want to build a ship that can do all three different kinds of cargo in one, ship, I can only do that if I am good enough to build a ship that can actually do that. And if I wanted to do that, then maybe I would need to set aside different kinds of spaces and sizes and all sorts of stuff like that. And I would have to have really good construction techniques. I would have to really know what I was doing when I was constructing the ship. And maybe some other player wouldn't be able to do that, or maybe they'd be even better. And I take it out and I test it into a storm, and oh no, it sank in the storm. Oh no. Well, it's okay. I'll build a new one that can also survive a storm, or also go 1,500 meters a second, or whatever. Every time I add a new characteristic, a new mission type, I create something that is more difficult than either one would be alone. Like, how do I build a boat that can carry cargo and go 1,500 meters a second? That is individually, those challenges are not much. But when you put them together, suddenly it's very challenging. And when you add another thing in and another thing in and another thing in, you keep adding more and more complexity to your ships. So you're never like, oh, I have built the best ship I'll ever need. You're always like, oh, I could build a better ship. I could build a ship that can do this different pattern of things, this different category of interactions. And then when you're done, you'll learn something. And you'll be like, I can build another ship that does this even better, or that thing over there. This density keeps shipbuilding interesting, no matter how many ships you build, because there's no limit. All of the interactions can be recombined. Let's compare that to Space Engineers. In Space Engineers, you build a ship, and you fly through space. And there's only 3 things you can do in space, because space is empty. You can mine, you can travel, and you can do very bad shooting. Now, Space Engineers doesn't simply stop there. They knew that was a little bit lightweight, so they added in base building. That's right, your ships are also bases, which is very common in the sci-fi shipbuilding settings. So your ship is also a factory and a refinery and has places to sleep and medical bays and, greenhouses and whatever else you want to put in. This adds enough to make it so that people keep playing Space Engineers. I've played it for a few thousand hours myself. I think that most of Space Engineers' popularity is just because of its timing. When it came out, it was basically the only thing like that. But still, this is not a losing proposition, adding in this kind of complexity to the base building, to the shipbuilding. But the problem with it is that base building and shipbuilding don't multiply. If I build a cargo ship that also has to survive in heavy weather, those two challenges combine to make a very, very difficult challenge. But in Space Engineers, if I want to build a cargo ship that can also refine, I just build a cargo ship and then slap a refinery on it. There's no multiplicative difficulty at all. There's no considerations or concerns at all. You just put in the module and you're done. This flat result means that most of the high-end Space Engineers construction is fiction. We make up how well it would perform in some fictional environment. Oh, this fought in the Ergonaut War and then, did this thing. And of course it didn't do that because those things don't exist in the universe and can't exist in the universe. And while I'm not against that kind of play, I think it makes more sense to have a richer world with a wider variety of ways to interact with it. Just as an example, how about cargo? In Space Engineers, cargo comes in two types, big and small. No matter what it is, you can put it into the same box. The only difference is that big cargo moves through big connectors, and small cargo moves through any connector. Of course, small cargo connectors only exist on very certain kinds of ships, so fundamentally everything always moves through big connectors. If you want to transfer cargo, you just put a connector port on the end and you bump into whatever it is that you're trying to connect to, and you can transfer any amount of cargo at instantly, very, very fast. And there's just no constraints at all. It's very flat. There's no concerns over whether you're going to be transporting ores or computers or people or anything. It's just whatever can be pushed down that tube. People is a bad example, but you know what I mean. Whatever can be pushed down that tube can be stored, and everything is stored like that. On the other hand, in Stormworks, not only do you have like fluid tanks that can be connected with hoses, you also have physical cargo in the form of small boxes that have to be tied down, larger crates that have to be either tied down to a very specific, size slot, or you can use magnetic connectors. You can also drag things around, including other boats and stuff, using different kinds of connectors. There's 4 different kinds of connector, and there are lots of different physical configurations. There's very specific physical configurations for the different cargo components. The result here is that you have an immense difference in how you build your ships depending on what kind of cargo you plan to carry. Are you carrying cars? Are you carrying standard size cargo crates? Are you carrying small crates? Are you carrying fluid? Moreover, they also have a mass, which changes how you sit in the water. They can be lowering you down into the water so much that you sink, or they can make you top heavy and you might fall over. All of these concerns mean that as you try and push your cargo carrying capacity, you end up having to really be careful with how you build your ships. And that's ships. Like, how do you do aircraft with cargo components? How do you do helicopters, submarines? All of these challenges are unique and distinctive and challenging because there are so many different kinds of cargo that you might have to carry, as opposed to just one. That's just an example. I just want to make it clear that there are ways in which you could make even something like Space Engineers more interactive with the world by giving it different kinds of interactions, different kinds of cargo to carry, that sort of thing. But I think it's important to realize that even if the base building in Space Engineers was really good, it still wouldn't be base building. Let me just tell you what I mean. Most base building games are done in real time, or not really real time. They're done in one mode. You build and you fitness test at the same time. You never really switch modes in any sort of significant way. It's always running. You're always building. You're always doing fitness tests. The idea being that you're turning noise into signal. Here come more enemies. Here come more friends. Here comes more supplies. Put it together in a way that makes sense. That's the narrative, right? Build something that makes sense. Build on what you built before. How well can you plan ahead, given that you don't know exactly what's coming because it's so much noise and so much chaos? And yeah, you can build a base for a specific purpose, like this one's on an ice sheet, or this one's to defend against the orcs or whatever. But at the end of the day, 90% of your story comes from the noise of the world just coming at you, and how you incorporate that noise into your own personal base, into your own personal narrative. Which you do by building, right? You constantly build. But vehicles aren't really like that. With a vehicle, you know right away what your mission is, and the question is whether or not you're good enough to build a vehicle that can do it. In Kerbal, you don't launch a spaceship and then go, I wonder what sort of wacky hijinks I'm going to get up to today. Where should we go? No, you launch a spaceship and you know exactly where you're going to go because you built the spaceship to do that exact mission. You go into the vehicle bay and you say, I'm going to build a mission to go to the moon. You finish that and you go to the moon. Woo! They're two different modes. You've got construction mode and you've got pilot mode, and they don't overlap. Not much, anyway. I mean, there are times when you'll be like, let's go to the moon. Oh, I made a mistake. Let's go back into the vehicle bay. Now let's go to the moon. Sure. There's times when you're going to go back and forth a little bit. But for the most part, the point is that you're going to want to have a ship that can do a specific mission. There's very little noise. The narrative isn't, what sort of wacky hijinks are we going to get up to on the mission? The narrative is, are you good enough to go on this mission? Are you good enough to build a ship that can do this mission? How did your ability to build something interface with this exact mission that you knew you were going to go on? There's no noise, or very, very little noise. This is not a small difference. This separation between construction and piloting is really important. It's the key to why vehicle building games have a power that no other genre has. And that is, of course, to share vehicles. If I were to go into Stormworks or Space Engineers and I would, not really feeling like building something today, I can just go download someone else's ship. And they spent like 10,000 hours on it, and it's a cool ship, and I can just fly it. Oh, woohoo, let's run around, let's fly it. And I can be marveled. I can be like, wow, look at this cool ship, look at all these things it can do, it's awesome. Now, true, there are some base building games that allow you to do the same thing. Like you can play, prison engineer, prison architect, and go download somebody else's prison. But there's so much RAM involved because that is a constant ongoing process, right? There's no stopping point during base building, not natural stopping points. It's always rolling forward with more noise and more investment and more processes. How do you keep the base running? What sort of challenges are you going to face next week? Who's training right now? What sort of objectives do you have to fill in before, the next season comes around and you're caught with your pants down? Those are all things that bases are constantly thinking about, right? If you transfer your base to another player, they're going to feel pretty lost. But if you transfer a boat or a spaceship to another player, they're going to be like, I can fly a boat or a spaceship. Let's go. Pilot a boat. You don't fly it. Well, maybe you do. Depends on the boat. There is this distinctive edge where when you're done building your ship, you can close all of that RAM down. Nobody cares how the engine of your ship works. Not even you. Once it's built, it's built. It doesn't matter how it works. As long as it does, you're fine. You're golden. You don't have to tell the player how it works. They're never going to have to go in there and change it around. You don't have to worry about it. You can close that RAM down. You don't have to tell them, I used a particular angle of surface for this pontoon to give you the exact amount of lift you need. No, you don't have to explain that. All you have to do is let them fly it, and they'll feel that stability as they fly it. They won't know where it comes from or how it works, but they'll feel it. And this is true even if you're the pilot. Even if you're piloting the same ship that you built, you're still going to have this same RAM closing down, freeing sensation. Like, I finished with that part of this ship. I don't have to worry about it anymore. It just works. I've just tucked it away into a black box, and now everything just runs. Except, of course, that's only half the story, isn't it? Because nothing ever just runs in a vehicle building game. If something just runs in a vehicle building game, that means that the constructor, the person building the boat, didn't go as far as they should have. Because anytime I get the process of flying the boat down simple enough so that anyone could do it, I add more stuff, right? Oh yeah, this boat's super easy to pilot around. You just, press 1 to start it, as the pop-up text says. Press 1 to start it and then drive it around as normal and all that jazz. But if you're trying to put out a fire, how do you deploy the fire suppressor? How do you deploy the gangplank to rescue people that are stuck on another boat? How do you go into dive mode? How do you go into fast mode? How do you go into high seas mode? Because the boat does so many different challenges at the same time, there are a lot of things that I can't easily automate. I can't easily make it happen behind the player's back. Instead, I've got to talk to the player. I've got to tell the pilot, this is how you do that stuff. This starts even at the smallest section, right? Like, I've built a very typical boat, and I've got an engine down here. And even before, I already said, nobody cares how your engine works, not even you, right? But that's not true. Because your engine has a bunch of fail states. It can overheat. It can run out of fuel. You can accidentally burn out the clutch by throwing it into reverse without setting it up ahead of time. All of these things need to be communicated to the player. And so the player looks over there and the player says, oh, look, there's the temperature gauge for the engine. There's the fuel gauge. There's the press clutch before you change to reverse or whatever gauge. These are things that are part of your construction, and you're telling the player that the black box is just a black box. Like, nobody cares how the engine works. You don't have to know how the engine works, but you do have to know, I've got a couple of things to say. And you have to listen when I say those things. Doesn't matter how I work. But there are some edge cases where I'm going to need to tell you something. As the person building the engine, maybe I'm really good at it. Maybe I'm building an engine that can't overheat, so I don't show the player the temperature gauge. Maybe I'm building an engine that's a glitch engine and never runs out of fuel, so I don't show them the fuel gauge. Maybe I have a built-in clutch system which automatically does all of the shifting and counter-shifting to prevent clutch overloads, so I don't have to show them that. Now I've got this really clean little black box that just says whether it's on or off, right? Well, I bet I could push that further, right? I could make this black box do more. Like, I think the engine could probably take us to 500 meters a second if I pushed it. But of course, now I've got these constraints here. You got to be able to turn like this, and you got to be able to do these things because that's fast enough that you're breaking the speed limit, speed of sound, and that sort of stuff, right? Oh, but what if I could automate them, so the player doesn't have to worry about them? Well, then I can build a better engine. One that can take you underwater. You just have to switch into underwater mode to do that, or whatever else, right? What we're talking about here is your construction is not limited by the systems you can build. Your construction is limited by the systems you can build and whether or not you can tell the pilot how to use them. Oh, did you want to rescue someone on high seas? You got all these waves buffeting you around, and you're trying to figure out how to put out a crane and rescue a boat over there. And well, here's some instructions on how the boat is built to allow you to do that. Or if I'm really good, I've automated it for you. This is a way to communicate with the other player. This is a way for the builder to tell the pilot about what they've built. And I think that this is the most important part of this kind of experience. It's really a shame when you get a vehicle game that dumbs down the way that people pilot your vehicles. For example, the Lego games, where you might build a car And you can't really do anything with it. You can't make it interesting or cool or anything like that. You can change how it looks, but other than that, it just drives exactly like every other car. There's no edge cases. There's no systems to monitor. There's no systems to automate. It just drives. This is a huge problem for me because how can I push that? How can I make that more interesting? I can't. And even if I could, I have no way to communicate it with the player because there's no distinct UI elements that I can add to your Lego boat or your Lego car. To me, there is this, let me think about how to put this. A vehicle is an idealized property. A vehicle is not something that exists in a vehicle construction game. It is a concept. It is a theory. It's a photograph, right? You got the vehicle here. Now, at some point, the player will put it into a world. And it can go in any world, any player. You can just instantiate it. Boom, it's in the world. Boom, it's in the world. Boom, it's in this world too. Wherever you need, however many copies you need, you can just take that idealized form and dump it into any world you'd like. Share it between any players you want. Try and do anything you want with it. Because all of the engineering that we've put into this has been packaged up, very carefully tucked away into little black boxes, and made into something that any player can drive, any player can understand. As compared to, say, base building, where you can create a complicated base, but stapling that base into another world would be kind of nonsensical, because that's not the world that the base was built in. And you wouldn't be able to run it very well, because there are too many things going on that aren't tidily packaged up. But a vehicle building ends. At some point you have the vehicle, and you can just share it. This is something I really adore about vehicle building games, and one of the problems I've got with the current spate of clones is that they're all puzzle games. They're all puzzle vehicle games. Like, here's the level. Can you kill these 45,000 people with the vehicle you build, or whatever it is, right? And you build your vehicle, and you go and you kill all these people. The standard stuff, besieged type stuff. My problem with this is that this is not an idealized vehicle. This is not something I can share with my friends. This is not something I can spawn into any world and have it be useful. It's built specifically for this challenge. And even if I build a vehicle that can do this challenge and other challenges, there's no reason to, because this challenge will never happen again. So why would I ever bother to build a vehicle that can do this and something else? I'll just do this and then never think about it ever again. This is why, to me, the open world games are so much more compelling, because I can create a vehicle that can do an arbitrary number of tasks, and I can share it with an arbitrary number of players who can put it into their worlds, and I can take their vehicles and put them into my worlds, and we can do things like team up so that I'm like an aircraft carrier with their aircraft and stuff like that. These are things that you can't do in a game which is entirely puzzle-based like Besieged. I think that's more or less everything I wanted to say. I think that this is a genre that has legs. I think that people underestimate how amazing it is to create a vehicle that can be used. And that sounds so simple, right? But when you think about it, most games don't let you do that. Creating a base that can be used, well, most bases can only be used in this one particular situation by this one particular player, and if they go away for a day or two, they'll probably forget how to use it too. But a vehicle, you can build it, and it can be used by anyone, anywhere. That's what I like about vehicle building games.